How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another collaboration between Infinite Sports and Sloppy Saturdays. I'm Kenneth Grunfelder along with Dom Matassa. So we did actually go live a couple times this past weekend. Obviously, the main topic is the NFL draft. Gave our thoughts on certain picks, how teams did. But now we're going to do more of that today. Just kind of talk about what teams did well in our eyes, some surprises, maybe, if there's a pick or a team that didn't really do well in the draft in our eyes. So we'll talk about that as well and things like that. But first, Dami, how are you today on this Tuesday?
I'm doing great. Like you said, we went live multiple times over the draft. We feel like the lives went really well. It was kind of like an adjusting period for us because it was our first time really working live. We also did a live pre-draft too as well that I didn't even make into an audio that we could also get out for you guys. That just escaped my mind as well. But yeah, like we said, you guys were like very interactive with these lives, especially in the first round. We had so many guests on sharing their opinions. And me and Ken were discussing before this, we're going to continue to also incorporate live streams as well. That if you guys missed it on TikTok, we're also going to get out to you guys on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all these podcast platforms turn into audio. But yeah, we wanted to go live for you guys and give like our raw reactions and interact with you guys. But now this podcast is an opportunity for us to really give our thoughts without having to address everybody in the comment section and just to really give like we sat down, we looked at all the rounds now, it all wrapped up, and we want to give like our finishing thoughts on everything.
That's right. So, we talked a little bit about it this upcoming football season. Maybe we do some kind of live, a couple of lives where we kind of like preview the week and also recap the week. And that would be both from, both talking about, college football, the big games there, and then, of course, the NFL as well. So that's kind of a work in progress. The NFL schedule will be coming out in the coming weeks. So really looking forward to that. Got little tidbits throughout the draft, I believe, on some of the matchups in certain weeks, some of the international games as well. So let's kind of dive right into the draft here. So I guess we'll kind of start out with what teams we liked, what teams did really well in our eyes, and one team I would want to bring up is a team we talked about a lot, even on the lives, and I feel like we always talk about them, and it's the Cleveland Browns. We always talk about how their defense has been their strength, and it was once again last year. And they had a couple of nice pieces on offense do well last year. Some young pieces. We saw Harold Fannin kind of break out, young tight end, and Quinshon Junkins as well. But and of course, we saw a little bit of Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders last year too. And those two will have an opportunity to maybe compete for the starting job more so. I think Shador Sanders, the ball is in his court, and then you got Deshaun Watson in the mix. But the Browns, they went out, with their first selection, they take a tackle, and then they also draft two wide receivers as well to add to that room. And we kind of talked about the different skill sets that both receivers possess. Concepcion is kind of more of that, shifty, crafty kind of guy, and then you got Denzel Boston, who's kind of the bigger receiver, 50-50 ball guy. I think the Browns are kind of missing on that offense. You still got Jerry Jeudy there. They gave him a lot of money and a couple of other receivers as well, but they did add some more depth and kind of ramped up their receiving core there. And again, you're going to have the other weapons that I just talked about. From last year with Quinshon Junkins. Obviously, he got hurt late in the season, but you're going to see him back, and you add Fan into the mix too. Again, it's going to come down to the quarterback play, right? Shador Sanders stepping in again wasn't great, but in his limited action, you want to maybe see a little bit more what he has to offer. Give him a little bit more of a runway to see what you actually have in him. And, depending on how the competition goes, if it is Shador Sanders to start the year and, he doesn't perform well and, they end up going with Deshaun Watson and he steps in, then that could be an option as well. But I think that's what it's going to come down to. The Browns did also take a quarterback as well later in the draft. Adami, you could touch upon that more if you want. and how that impacts the quarterback room. But look, I mean, again, comes down to the quarterback play. If the Browns' quarterback play is good with the defense that they have and the weapons they added on offense, I mean, they could be a playoff team. I mean, they made a playoffs a couple years ago with Joe Flacco. So, I do think that they have an opportunity to do that. And that's kind of my thoughts. But yeah, the Browns are a team that we both really like. But Dami, you can go more into it and give your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely love what the Browns are building. And I talked about coming into this draft how I like what the Browns are building. And for the biggest thing for the Browns now, I feel like you're stacking really good draft classes upon each other, which I feel like we haven't necessarily discussed. Because when you look at the Browns last year, they get Swearinger, who was the defensive rookie of the year. They get him late, really good pick. You talk about them trading back from the Travis Hunter thing. Getting Mason Graham, who ended up being a really good player as well, a run stopper in your interior D line. You get Harold Fannin Jr., that wasn't a first round pick, that became a really good pass catcher, arguably in the back half of the year, your best pass catcher. And you got Quinshon Judkins in that draft as well, who we believe is an all purpose back, who we watched his college career. And again, he's coming off of a massive injury. It's going to be interesting to see how he comes back from that. But we believe they also got a really good running back as well. So you got 4 really good positions coming out of that draft. Now you look at this draft, and we feel like they also did really well again. We wanted them to go offense, offense, offense in this draft, especially early. We felt like that defense was elite. We felt like if you're able to put up 20 plus points with that offense, this team has a chance to make the playoffs. And when you look at with how they did in their draft, they traded back with the Chiefs, who we discussed. We felt like the Chiefs did not need to trade up. They trade back. I felt like they were going tackle anyway. They got their pick of the litter at tackle at 9 while picking up extra capital. They go Spencer Fanu. Now, it was a discussion, especially in our lives, Spencer Fanu or Francis Manoa. Kind of feel like Andrew Berry, Francis Manoa did have some concerns. We were talking about injury concerns. Spencer Fanu came in pretty clean. That was the ideology there that we felt like why they went Fanu over Manoa. But we also talked about in previous draft podcasts how there wasn't this big gap between Francis Manoa and Spencer Fanu. It was more just like what the mocks were coming out as, but we felt like they were pretty close, so I didn't mind that. I discussed time and time again, I thought my 4th receiver in this draft was Denzel Boston. A lot of people's were Casey Concepcion. Oddly enough, this team found ways to get both of them. I think, again, very much how you touched on, you look at Casey Concepcion, a field stretcher, and they could use in their return game as well to help that area. But they also get Denzel Boston, who they could leave on the outside as a 6'4" physical type receiver and red zone threat. So again, I don't necessarily look at it as doubling up on the same position. I think you get 2 very different type of players that diversify that room and could round out this offense pretty well. Then you look on the back end of the draft. I like the Justin Jefferson pick out of Alabama. I thought he was one of the best players on their defense, coming out of a really good program for the last couple of years. I was surprised how low he went. A guy that was able to play linebacker and on the edge. I like that as kind of like, I don't know, a draft pick with upside. They take the tackle Austin Barber out of Florida. I think, again, they're trying to revamp this O-line. I don't know necessarily if Austin Barber is going to come in year 1 and be a starter for them. I think Spencer Fanu is definitely going to be a year 1 starter for them. But again, helping out their offensive line. They took Parker Beresfield as well out of Alabama. They took these players, him and Jefferson, pretty close together. Again, you're taking a player out of a premier program. Also, a center position that we discussed in this draft. I feel like the center position wasn't necessarily there, especially in the initial couple of rounds. So the fact that they came away with a center, I like it. And then you also, what I actually forgot about, they took Emmanuel McNeill-Warring at 58. A lot of people expected this guy to be a first-round pick. I felt like that was great value for them. We touched upon that they didn't necessarily need defense, but I thought that value at that pick was one of the best picks in the draft, quite honestly. When you look at Emmanuel McNeill-Warring out of Toledo, and we discussed it with Dylan Thiedemann as well, we felt like with Caleb Downs being this generational safety, kind of pushed these other safeties down the board. Safeties that could have either been the first safety taken or went in the first round. I thought Emmanuel McNeill-Warring was a great pick for them. And then you look at how they lost like Greg Newsome not that long ago, getting another secondary player in there that I believe that was a valuable pick. And then also you wanted me to touch on Taylor Green. I like the Taylor Green pick. I feel like they were in the right position to take a quarterback with upside because I feel like they don't owe anybody right now in that quarterback room any explanation of anything that they do. Because when you look at Deshaun Watson, they paid him all the money they could have. He hasn't panned out on his end of that deal. When you look at Shedeur Sanders, everybody wants to talk about the hype on Shedeur Sanders. The fact of the matter is, he was a late pick. I don't expect Taylor Green to really get in the mix this year. And when you look at Taylor Green, he was inconsistent accuracy wise. Arkansas was just a horrible program, but they did put up a lot of points. Taylor Green kind of goes into the Joe Milton family when you look at just like physical capabilities. This guy has it all. When we looked at the combine numbers, he had historic combine numbers for a quarterback. You're looking at a guy that could run 4.3, a guy that's imposing with his size, could throw it out of the gym. So if you could get Taylor Green to be a little more accurate, I feel like, again, this new Brown staff could look at Taylor Green a year from now, a year and a half from now, and say, hey, we could really work with this guy in a running style offense. Like I said, I thought that was a pretty good pick upside wise, because again, we all expect the Browns to possibly be taking a quarterback next year. We don't know how anything is going to go, and I'm quite honestly fine either way they go at quarterback. I don't necessarily like the quarterbacks, either of them, but what they brought to this offense, I'll be fine with them going Shedeur, because again, you look at Shedeur like maybe possibly he could be the quarterback in the future, but then I'd also be fine with them going to Deshaun Watson as well, because with what they brought on offense, you may need a veteran that really knows how to run an offense and could give them some type of floor. So I wouldn't mind either way, but I thought Taylor Green, again, take a shot on somebody that had extreme athleticism, extreme upside. And I feel like Taylor Green, maybe if it was 4 or 5 years ago, when people would take Josh Allen and people would take Anthony Richardson in the first round, bake it on these inaccurate quarterbacks with these huge upsides, he would have went probably a lot earlier 4 or 5 years ago. Unfortunately, I think Anthony Richardson ruined that for him. But yeah, rounding it out, a little bit of a tangent, but I do really love this Browns draft.
Yeah, and again, I mean, we keep emphasizing it. It's really just going to come down to the quarterback play, and they play in a division where you got Joe Burrow, you got Lamar Jackson, so you are gonna, you're gonna need a quarterback that's going to match with those guys. I mean, we're still kind of waiting on the Steelers. There was some Aaron Rodgers news today. Something that I'd have to look into it again, but something the Steelers size restructure something that's rarely done in the NFL. I have to look into it, but yeah, still waiting on a decision there. Another team I would say did very well and addressed their deficiencies is the Dallas Cowboys, and I think one player that you could say was maybe a steal was their first pick, Caleb Downs. And, the Cowboys having the opportunity to get him, a guy that you add to that secondary, which was a problem, and the defense as a whole was a problem. It got better once they, made a couple moves at the trade deadline, bringing in Quinnen Williams. Obviously, previous offseason, they traded Micah Parsons, you get Kenny Clark, but, trade deadline, you get Quinnen Williams. And then, recently you got Rashawn Gary from the Packers. But you also, now you add Caleb Downs to the secondary. You add Malachi Lawrence, the linebacker from UCF, and you also had the linebacker from Michigan. They drafted a tackle, Drew Shelton from Penn State, another defensive lineman, Overton from Alabama. So Devin Moore, cornerback from Florida. Dami can go into more details with some of these players and their strengths. But, what was the weakness of the Cowboys last year? It was their defense. Their defense was not good. Obviously, trading Micah Parsons, they were like, it's addition by subtraction. They didn't want to pay him. But, you did get a first-round pick out of it, which, you'll take. They got the Packers' first-round pick. But, yeah, they're slowly rebuilding this defense. And, the Cowboys' offense, when Dak Prescott is healthy, is, at full strength is a top offense. When you give them a good running game, which they did have last year, they didn't have the year before that. Javonte Williams did a nice job. And then obviously trading for George Pickens, we got to see what the deal is with that. He hasn't signed the franchise tag yet. But, if you give this Cowboys team, just an average offense or an average defense, and their offense is going to put up points, this is going to be a good team in the NFC. And right now, I would say they could find themselves back in the postseason. I also think with what's going on in Philadelphia, I have some concerns with Washington. Obviously, they made it to the championship game a couple years ago, but they took a massive step back. The Giants, we both expect them to take a big step forward this year. But I don't know. For me right now, I'm trending towards picking Dallas to win the NFC East. Right at this current moment. So obviously, the players that they got to go out there and make an impact and do well for the team. But right now on paper, I would say the Cowboys had a good draft. They addressed the defensive side of the ball, and again, if their defense is average and Dak Prescott goes out there and has another good year, this is going to be a good team.
Yeah, again, I like all throughout when you talk about every single pick of the draft. I don't know where I would rank their later picks, but when you look at the Cowboys getting Caleb Downs, who we personally said, I know you were saying he's one of the best players in the draft. I thought he was the best player in the draft. I constantly say it time and time again. People push down the board these game changer safeties every couple of years that could be crazy impactful for a defense. And you highlighted it when you look at the Dallas Cowboys and their defense last year, how explosive their offense was, how the first half of the year specifically, their defense was historically bad. No team arguably needed Caleb Downs more than the Dallas Cowboys. And what I love about the Dallas Cowboys with Caleb Downs, you're not just getting a piece of the puzzle player, a really good player. You're getting a quarterback of a defense. You're getting a guy instinctually that already has the instincts and the mind of an NFL veteran. You're getting a guy that makes everybody on that defense better. And you saw it with how many picks on Ohio State defense went in the first round, second round, and throughout this draft. And the best part about it is everybody talks about Arvell Reese. Everybody talks about Sonny Styles, these players that went before him. The Big Ten Player of the Year was Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs, I think, is going to make this defense marginally better. I think that was the best move that the Dallas Cowboys ever could have made. And I absolutely love that they went up one pick and traded 2 fifth-round picks that you could throw out the window because there was no way you could have took the risk of Caleb Downs slipping down one more pick. This is a guy that's going to absolutely change life on Dallas's defense. And the thing is with Caleb Downs, what I predict as well, the other major thing with Caleb Downs from everything we're hearing, he also has arguably the best characters in the draft as well. So again, with some of the players Dallas has over the years, this isn't a guy that you're going to have to go to sleep at night and hope you don't see 1,700 texts waking up in the morning with notifications. He's a guy that's all ball. His brother's in the league as well. Like, this is a guy from every single standpoint on and off the field. Absolute home run for Dallas. Love what they did there. When you look at Malachi Lawrence, he's a guy that I think has more raw potential than anything as an edge rusher. Played for other top programs, and he was a guy last year that could have even, people think, was looked at to go even higher. But I liked them taking an edge rusher there. I thought it was a little bit weird because Akeem Mesidor went right before them. I thought there was a chance they were eyeing Akeem Mesidor, and they very well could have been. The thing people don't like about him is that he's 25 years old, but I don't mind that necessarily. So, I would love to hear after. We may never know if they were going after Akeem Mesidor, but I love safety edge for them in the first round. I thought those were great position selections. And again, I never thought Caleb Downs was going to be there. I like the upside of Lawrence. Deshaun Barhan, I like a linebacker edge combo. We consistently say this time and time again. I feel like when you talk about front seven, the thing that people want more and more in the NFL as it keeps happening as of late are players that you don't know if they're rushing the passer or dropping back in coverage. When you see a lot of these hybrid players that were able to play linebacker and edge rusher, this leaves offenses now, especially in crucial downs, not knowing if these players are going to drop back in coverage or rush the passer. I like that pick. And again, Michigan always has a great defense, always develops great defensive line type players. I also really like the LT Overton pick as well, one of the best players on Alabama's defensive line. Again, I thought these Alabama players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, went kind of low. I like Drew Shelton at Penn State as well. I think he has the capability to eventually be a starting offensive lineman for this team. I mean, when you look at Drew Shelton at Penn State, a rush-heavy offense with Nick Singleton, with Kaytron Allen over the last 3 years, like they were running the football heavy, and I felt like their offensive line in the trenches was always really good. I think, again, maybe he moves to guard, maybe he stays at tackle. I think that's a guy that could definitely develop as their as an offensive lineman. But yeah, you said it to start it off. I feel the same way about it. I feel like Dallas is at this point, they had a really good draft. We feel like they get to stay right a lot. Despite them not making deep runs in the playoffs recently, they get this day right, though. This is one of the days they get right. But I feel like it's really going to rely on Pickens. What's going to happen with Pickens? He's that great of a player. He's one of the best players in the NFL. He's a borderline top 5 receiver, an elite receiver in the NFL. He really made that known this year. And again, are they going to play around like they did with Micah Parsons, or are you going to sign one of the best players in the league? They have Pickens, but what they add on defense, I think this defense could be sufficient. And offense with Dak, who's a really good QB, CeeDee, who I think is the best receiver in the league, and George Pickens, who's an elite receiver. I think this team could definitely make a run, but again, a lot of ifs right now.
No, it's very true, and like you said, they don't typically go on deep playoff runs. They haven't gone to a conference championship in our lifetime, but what they consistently do, year in and year out, is draft well. They do bring in abundance of talent from the NFL draft, so they do have to be commended for that. The Pickens stuff, I mean, yeah, it's it could go one of two ways. Obviously, we could see could it go the Micah Parsons route, or does it go, the CeeDee Dak route where it takes a while, but they eventually get it done. But you see what Dak Prescott can do when you have that number 2 receiver, which they were missing, before Pickens got there, and lack of running game. You give Dak Prescott those two things, and you're not just relying on CeeDee Lamb. I mean, even when CeeDee Lamb was out last year, I mean, Pickens, he feasted as a number 1 receiver. I mean, and they put up big numbers, and then he came back, and it still worked. Pickens still put up big numbers, even with CeeDee Lamb coming back. And the other thing too is obviously with the offensive line. We've seen a lot of guys, over the years, because back in when Dak first got into the league, I mean, that offensive line's now gone. Zach Martin finally, hung it up after a Hall of Fame career. So you got to rebuild that. So yeah, look, the Cowboys are in a good spot. Now it's just all about going out there and proving to everyone that, hey, these guys, the guys that they got, they go out there and they prove that they're good players, and the Cowboys go out there and prove that they're back to being a good team and being a threat in the NFC and in the NFL in general. So I guess now moving on, I do want to touch upon a pick that you loved that I think, there's definitely a mixed reactions on the pick. And that is the Rams taking Ty Simpson. I think that's where we can bring this conversation. So what I will say about the Ty Simpson pick, I like it for the future. Don't get me wrong. I do like it for the future because I do think he is stepping into a situation where he's not going to start right away. He's going to sit behind a future Hall of Fame quarterback. You got a future Hall of Fame head coach now, in the fold, in Sean McVay. He's in a good spot. Doesn't have to start right away. And when he does eventually step in, he's going to have something that he didn't really have in Alabama, and that was a running game with Kyren Williams, with Blake Corum. Because it's going to be within, I guess we could say, 3 years, right? I think that's fair to say, with some kind of time frame.
The thing is, too, that was pretty tough with Jordan Love as well. If you don't make it happen in 3 years, how are you going to give the guy the next contract?
That is a valid point. So I like the situation that he ended up in a lot, but looking at the Rams and the current structure of the team and where they're at right now, I also would say and I do agree with the people that criticize the pick, is maybe you wanted them to take somebody there that is going to help the team right now, because this team came within 1 game of the Super Bowl. And if they would have got to the Super Bowl based off of, the opponent, the Patriots, and the issues on the offensive line that they had and the front that the Rams had, they maybe could have been the team that hoisted up the Lombardi. It's a big what if, but it is definitely possible that the NFC Championship game, we saw the 2 best teams remaining, playing in that game. So that would probably be my one critique of the pick. I think Ty Simpson ended up in a great situation, and I think that sitting behind Stafford, you got Sean McVay there. It could be a very easy transition. If he ends up being the guy, he steps into a good situation, and then he goes on and he has a good, pro career. But for a team that's trying to, maximize this window and to get back to a Super Bowl at least and squeeze out another one potentially, I think maybe that wasn't the right pick. That's not to say again that I don't like Ty Simpson, the prospect, because obviously from you talking about him a lot, you think he's arguably the best quarterback in this draft. Which, if that turns out to be the case, then this is going to be a home run pick. But I think for the right now, for a team that's trying to win the Super Bowl, maybe that wasn't necessarily the right pick. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I like 100% disagree. I think this was the right pick for the Rams. When we were together, I did see it very early. I guess people knew to get me the information with how much I love this
Yeah,
kid.
the leaks. I mean, I don't
I mean, they,
understand that.
they were they were in the middle of like picking a pick, like two selections before this pick even happened. I don't even know how I
Yeah,
got the information, and I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. Whatever, one of my favorite players in this draft going into a ridiculous situation. Again, I couldn't have been more high on it when I saw that happen. Then I went to bed and really thought it over, slept on it, and I'm even higher on it. I absolutely love this pick. There are multiple reasons why I love this pick, and it really dawned on me over the last couple of days. One thing you talk about the Rams, they could use this pick for a win now move. They're a team that's on the top of the list when we talk about Super Bowl contenders going into this year. 100% true. They could have done that. But how many times have we seen the Rams go for win now moves? They literally just went for a win now move right before this draft, trading this pick to the Chiefs for Trent McDuffie, one of the best corners in the league. That's a win now move, and you gave off a first round pick for it. Then you also look again, they also brought in another Chiefs corner in Watson. Last year, they brought in Devontae Adams, an older player, another win now move. This team consistently goes after win now, win now, win now. And the other thing I have to say is when you look at the great organizations, they plan for the future while their team is on the rise currently. Look at all the teams that did this. When you look at Ravens, when they had Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco was still good, they bring in Lamar Jackson. When you look at the Chiefs, Alex Smith was really good. That pick turned a lot of heads at the time. I think it worked out pretty good for them. When you look at the Packers, they did it numerous amount of times. Works out for them every single time. When you look at the 49ers in the 90s, they did it again. When Steve Young was on the rise, people thought, how could you get rid of Joe Montana? Teams consistently do this. Teams that want to extend their window even further with the players they have. And as good as the Rams are, they do have some young players as well where, like, they could be in the fold when Ty Simpson gets going as well. Like, I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with them extending their window here with this pick. And I think the Rams really looked at them having the 13th pick, and they're like, hey, we're going to be a team for the next couple of years that are going to sit at pick 20, 25, 30 in the NFL draft. We're not going to get an opportunity to take a quarterback that's a top 15 pick selection. We're not going to have the opportunity to take a first-round quarterback. This is our one chance because of the trade that happened with the Falcons that ended up being a really bad trade. And the Falcons didn't take off last year. They got the 13th pick. But again, for the Rams, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. Again, you probably have to get him in at least, if not next year, the year after that, because you got to figure out if this is a quarterback that you're going to give that next contract to. Again, you could wait a little bit like Jordan Love, but you got to at least see a full year and a half of him before you give him another contract. But again, if say Stafford's one of those guys that really extends his prime, I also think there's nothing wrong of getting rid of Stafford within maybe after if he has one good year left, you get rid of him still and you bring this kid in. Like, I absolutely love it. And then I talked about, like, I think he's the best quarterback in the draft. I think when you look at situation, this is probably the best situation a first-round quarterback has ever went to since Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Like, you look at this player going into a playoff team, a Super Bowl contender, you could argue it's an even better situation because they're a Super Bowl contender right now. But I think after all the Rams win that moves and you look at teams that really plan for the future while they were at the top of the league, it's worked out for them every single time. You want to extend your window. You don't want to just be good for the next 2 years with Matt Stafford. You want to be good for the next 10, 15 years. This was the pick to make for them, especially because, again, like I said, it's not like it's a team that never goes win now, never makes moves for the now. They made plenty of the moves for the now in the last 2-3 years. It was time to extend that window. I think he's going to fit perfectly in the system. I mean, the biggest thing with Ty Simpson is we talk about Sean McVay in early retirement. Is Sean McVay going to be there when Ty Simpson is there? That's like the only question for me. But even if he's not, I mean, you're getting to absorb everything with Sean McVay like a sponge for 2 years anyway. I absolutely love this pick. I thought, again, it was bold, but I think it was 100% the right one.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I would say too is, one of the biggest weaknesses of the Rams last year was, of course, the secondary. I mean, the secondary got torched, especially towards the end of the year in the playoffs. And yeah, you mentioned it. They traded a high pick to get Trent McDuffie from the Chiefs. You added another corner from the Chiefs as well, Jalen Watson. So it's like, I said, like, yeah, you could add a player that helps you win now. Well, the Rams are a team that doesn't really have a ton of holes. So, that by taking Ty Simpson, they had the luxury of saying, hey, we feel like we don't have a ton of glaring needs. We could do this and be bold and take Ty Simpson. And like you said, set yourselves up for the future potentially. So,
And you look at a lot of teams who didn't do this and what ended up happening. When you look at a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, they never really prepared for life after Ben Roethlisberger. They've had a quarterback carousel that can't get this team over the top for the last 5 years. Now they're depending on a quarterback that's 100 years old to come back, and that's what they're depending on. Like, you see teams that get so comfortable with an elite quarterback that they just want to ride them out till the very, very end, and they're not prepared for life after that quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, they took Mason Rudolph, and Ben got hurt in 2019, and he started, but Mason Rudolph, you kind of figured, yeah, he's not going to be anything.
They
And
reached for Kenny Pickett in the draft. They had
yep, yeah, Trubisky they brought in, yeah, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the best out of that group, but again, it's not really saying much. But yeah, no, that is a great example. They haven't.
The Steelers were again a team that
but also, yeah, but also they haven't been a team like the Rams. Obviously had the Falcons pick. Like the Steelers, they haven't really been picking in the upper echelon of the draft to be able to do that. So, but yeah, they are a team absolutely that has struggled to find that replacement. So, we'll have to see. But I did want to bring up Ty Simpson because I know that's your guy. And when he eventually gets his opportunity, we'll see how it goes. But I guess we'll kind of switch gears now. I kind of wanted to talk about both New York teams and how they did. And then maybe like one more thing before we wrap up. Anything else you want to touch upon? But I thought both teams did well. And obviously the Giants are on the come up. They're closer to competing than the Jets are. But I think especially within the first, few picks, and, the Jets ended up having 3 first-round picks by trading back in, they addressed holes. The Jets, they needed a pass rusher. They needed some pass catchers, and they went and did that. They took David Bailey. A lot of people, including us, expected them to take Arbel Reese, who then eventually fell to the Giants. So the Jets get their edge rusher. The Giants get that, that hybrid player that could line up as a linebacker that could also be, an edge rusher as well, which you got to like that versatility. And linebackers kind of been a position group that, the Giants have struggled over the years, but I think they've kind of maybe figured it out with Reese and Edmonds also they brought in as well. But, love the makeup of the Giants defense right now. And then, for the Jets, another surprise, taking Sadiq, the tight end, that I didn't think was definitely a bit of a shocker. I was looked at as, I guess the top tight end prospect going into the draft, or at least was up there for it. That did surprise me a little bit, and then they traded back in to take a receiver. But listen, I look at the Jets offense now, and I think, whatever quarterback that they decide to bring in, or not bring in, but if they're in a position, which likely will be, to take a quarterback in the quarterback class next year, I mean, that quarterback is going to be stepping into not such a bad situation, which is something that, you don't usually say with the Jets because, they have the 2 tackles. You got Breece Hall, you got Garrett Wilson, and then you had the two more pass catchers there. A.D. Mitchell, not bad trade acquisition last year. And you still have, the assets you got from, the trade deadline when you traded Sauce Gardner. So, again, maybe I'm being a little too – I know you're making faces. Maybe I'm being a little too positive with the Jets. But I'm trying. I'm trying. Like I could see I could see something, you know. And then for the Giants, again, their second pick was not the sexy pick, but but you know what? He's a guy around Noah that could, you know, he could slide in, play guard, and fortify the offensive line, which also has been an issue for the Giants for years. And you know, I like that. They also, you know, took a receiver as well. You know, added another pass catcher, which again, receiver room is kind of lacking, but they added a couple veterans this offseason as well with Mooney and Calvin Austin as well, Isaiah Likely. So it's not going to be, you know, Darius Slayton as the number 2 to Malik Neighbors, but they also took Colton Hood, the corner from Tennessee. Secondary, you know, needed improvement, so you at least added to that area as well. So, I mean, look, the draft, Evan Roberts on WFAN, he put it the best. You know, the draft provides like you know, at least a sense of hope for the time being that maybe your team is going to improve. But once you get to, you know, regular season games, and then all of a sudden, you know, if you're a Jet fan and you're not too thrilled with Geno Smith being quarterback, then, you know, then maybe that goes out the window. But I mean, listen, again, I think the Jets offensively, you know, I don't think, you know, the Brees Hall. I don't think it's, you know, not horrible. Definitely better than what it was to start, you know, to start last year. You know, they'll be in position to get a young quarterback, and then hopefully that young quarterback can succeed. But there's still obviously I'm not saying the Jets are going to compete for anything, but maybe still some improvement. That's really what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get like too excited about the Jets at all. I
Well,
like
that's
their
and I
picks.
wasn't
I
coming
really do
off as
like
that
their picks.
either.
I do like
I
their
wasn't.
picks, and I've heard
Yeah.
you and some other people saying it might not be as bad of a destination. Yeah, it may not be as bad of a destination as it was Wednesday night, but if I'm a quarterback, I'm not eyeing the Jets. Anyway, though, when you look at the pick number 2, they were going to go Arvo Reese or David Bailey. I was happy for them that they stuck in between those 2 players and didn't go elsewhere. I thought if you stuck with those 2 players, you really couldn't go wrong. We discussed how we would have liked Arvo Reese a little bit better for the Jets because he provides possibly a little more upside. Like we continuously say, those hybrid linebackers really translate well into what the NFL came to nowadays. But I also like David Bailey as well. When you look at the Jets, again, they aren't great at developing players, and David Bailey is that plug and play edge rusher that could be a game record for them, and he's going to be an above average starter day one. Arvo Reese, I think, has a little bit more development to him. So, again, very different players, but I was cool. They took a premier player at a premier position. Number 2, can't argue with that. I mean, again, if you're saying number 2 is a bad pick, there's really something off. At 16, Kenyon Sadiq, we were all together. We all wanted Makai Lemon. A lot of people didn't like the Kenyon Sadiq pick. I love the Kenyon Sadiq pick. I did Kenyon Sadiq after the first 3 receivers. Again, Makai Lemon obviously being one of the 3, but I thought Kenyon Sadiq is a premier playmaker. I think again, his stats aren't as eye-popping at Oregon because he was behind 2 tight ends as underclassmen, Terrence Ferguson, Patrick Herbert. And then this year, they had their pass catchers. Even him was dealing with injuries. He's a great run blocker, but I also don't look at him as, you know, everybody loves Mason Taylor. Now everybody loves Mason Taylor for some reason.
I mean, they took him last
I thought
year.
it
You
was
know,
a
like he's
flex.
going to his
I thought they
into
were
his second
still
year.
play for playmakers. Kenyon
Yeah.
Sadiq is not a guy where it's going to take Mason Taylor off the field. Kenyon Sadiq to me is like a wide receiver in a tight end's body. Like he's going to be able to be used creatively. He's going to be able to be a guy that primarily plays in the slot. It seems to me like they're going to use a lot of 12 personnel, 2 receivers, 2 tight ends. So I think there's definitely room for both of them for sure. I think Kenyon Sadiq has a lot of upside when you look at his size, when you look at his ability to go downfield. I think he has to shore up some catching, but his spectacular plays are insane, and he's a great run blocker as well. So again, he could stay on the field by himself as a blocker. He could stay along with another tight end. So versatile, and I think at the end of the day, you don't look at it as the Jets taking another tight end. You look at it as the Jets taking another playmaker. I really like the pick. And then for the people that were upset that they didn't take Makai Lemon at 16, they do get another receiver in Omar Cooper at 30. I don't love Omar Cooper. I don't hate him. I think he, again, at the spot, it was a pretty good pick value-wise. And I think, again, you add another playmaker to this offense. Now you look at a receiving core around Garrett Wilson. We like the potential of an A.D. Mitchell still. And you add Omar Cooper Jr., with Ken Sadiq, with Brees Hall. You're looking at a sufficient offense at least now. D'Angelo Ponds at 50. I like the value there. Again, we talked about D'Angelo Ponds. If he was 4 inches taller, he would probably be the best cornerback in this draft by far. He's not. He's going to have limitations, obviously, when you're a 5'8", 180-pound corner. When you're facing receivers that are 6'4", teams are going to be looking for that matchup. But I do think D'Angelo Ponds is a really good corner that plays a lot bigger than he is. I like the pick a lot there. Cade Klubnik was the one pick in the later rounds that I thought was a little bit of a head scratcher. The Jets continuously go for these 4th round quarterbacks that when you're at that position in the 4th round and the players that were around him, I think there was a Keontae Scott, there was an Elijah Surratt, there was other players that you could at least see having an impact to this team. You take a 4th round quarterback, and we continuously talk about them being in position to take a quarterback next year. It's like you're just taking this quarterback, and it's just empty value in my opinion. When you look at Geno Smith and how Jet season have gone, I think Cade Klubnik is going to get an opportunity to start a couple of games towards the end of the year to show if there's anything there. But again, 4th round quarterbacks don't usually pan out unless you're like a Dak Prescott. I feel like it's just such a waste of a pick when there were other players. I'm not saying you're going to hit on a 4th round pick. It's hard, but there were other positions where there was just a better chance of doing that. So I didn't like that pick. That pick was a head scratcher. But the other picks I do like, I like Darryl Jackson. I definitely think they needed defensive line help with Quinnen Williams going, with Jermaine Johnson going. I think they definitely needed help there. So I like their draft. I do. Not necessarily the pick I would have made at every single spot, but especially for their first 4 picks, I thought the picks were valid value-wise and where they took them and everything. I like their draft, and again, they had a really good draft, but it's still the Jets. It's still the Jets at the end of the day. I'm not sure either how much of a better situation a quarterback would be going to than last year, because they let go of all their great players to get this pick. Now, again, you're getting your next quarterback in the same timeline as all these players, but I'm not sure how much better they're going to be after losing Quinnen Williams, losing Sauce Gardner, and bringing in younger players. Their offense should be better, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's where the quarterback plays is the offense. So at least that could be better. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing people are talking about is, again, quarterback going in a good situation, possibly better situation. There's a good chance Aaron Glenn is tossed midway through this year or at the end of the year. He doesn't look like a guy that's going to serve his full contract as well. I don't know. In my opinion, I like the Jets draft. I do, but I'm just not even going to be too hopeful.
Yeah.
Let me get to the Giants, though. Giants are a team that I like. We talk about it time and time again. I became rooting with you with the Giants because it doesn't really affect me in any way. And if I like the players, friends of my teams are drafting, why not root for them a little bit too? When we look at Arvell Reese, a little bit of an odd fit, I would say. Again, I think the Giants got to a point where how the chessboard was falling. You never thought an Arvell Reese was going to be there. He's way too good of a player to pass up. But I also feel at the same time the Giants do kind of have a lot on their plate with how they're going to use a lot of these front 7 players, because you have a lot of players that are very similar. But like we said, you have pass rushers who, outside of the quarterback, is arguably the most important position. And you have a lot of players that are hybrid-type players that we like to see in this modern-day NFL. But when you look at Arvell Reese, when you look at Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, who I absolutely love, you look at 4 guys here where you have a lot of chess pieces to work with, but are you going to be able to put the puzzle together in a way where you can put everybody in a position to succeed without somebody's career not being sacrificed heavy? The quick answer to this thing, I would say, is that Kayvon Thibodeau isn't going to be there long term. So that's one player probably out of the puzzle. I still like Kayvon Thibodeau a lot. I feel like there's more meat on the bone in terms of his development. I like Kayvon Thibodeau. But, again, I think kind of the writing's on the wall with him. I don't even think the Giants were expecting Arvell Reese, but I think that makes it even more kind of pushing him out the door. When we look at Francis Mauigoa, again, somebody that we didn't expect to be there. I love the pick value-wise. It's a position that they didn't necessarily were dying for. We think this offensive line is efficient when Andrew Thomas is there, but definitely a pick that they could have used, a premier position at the tackle, a guy that we thought was the best offensive lineman in this draft. You add another player to beef up that offensive line for Jackson Dart. He said he's going to die for Jackson Dart, which, again, I don't know how good or bad that is. You would say it was
I
good.
mean,
Last
you
year,
love
Will
to hear it. You
Campbell,
love to hear it at least.
last year, Will Campbell said the same thing. He literally died on the field. So I don't know if that's a good sign or bad sign, but I like the two picks. I think the two picks value wise were really, really good. I think the thing is, though, when you were looking at the Giants, you were looking at secondary and receiver as their biggest needs. They don't address their biggest needs because the value's there. So now we see in round 2, round 3, they got to dip in and address probably their strongest needs. I like Colton Hood a lot out of Tennessee. We also like Jermon McCoy out of Tennessee. The problem is with Jermon McCoy is he got pushed down the board because I think people didn't like his medicals. He was injured all last year. He still has an injury going. So they went with Colton Hood, a little bit more of a safer pick. Do I think Jermon McCoy's a better player? Yeah, but I'm fine with Colton Hood there too. I think Colton Hood's a playmaker. I think he's a baller. I think it's definitely a position they needed, so I like that pick. And then Malachi Fields, I think Malachi Fields was in a little bit of a weird situation last year. Like we talk about Jeremiah Love for the last, again, year pretty much every single day. And then you have Jadarian Price there, who also went in the first round for Notre Dame as another running back. You had a first-time starter in TJ Carr. We think could be a franchise NFL quarterback, but took him a little bit of time to get going. So when you look at Malachi Fields for Notre Dame, he didn't necessarily have the biggest upside in the receiver and production he could get in a year of college. So again, I like his upside. And what I like about Malachi Fields, you alluded to it. They bring in Darnell Mooney. They have Darius Slayton. You have guys that can work in the slot. Malachi Fields is a bigger type receiver that helps out that room on the outside a little bit. I do think when the Giants start off in the first 3-4 weeks, you're going to see very limited opportunity for Malachi Fields. I think they're going to lean towards the veterans. I think they're going to run out a lot of Neighbors, Slayton, Mooney. But I think Malachi Fields towards the middle end of the year is really going to be prominent in this receiving corps. So I like that as well. I like J.C. Davis. I thought J.C. Davis, again, is a guy a year ago that could have went a lot higher on the offensive line. Maybe he's a guy that works into that offensive line as a starter eventually. And there was other later picks as well. They could have used some defensive line help. You knew they were going to take somebody in the middle. Bobby Jameson Travis is who they selected. So I like the Giants draft a lot. I thought the Giants were in a very unique position. I thought, again, having 2 top 10 picks and being a fringe playoff team is like one of those positions we never really even seen before. So I thought they had the best draft outlook based on where their team was and the picks they had to them. And I think they did a pretty good job. I just think it felt a little weird, a little bit unexpected.
Yeah, and also I know there's some select fans out there that are drawing comparisons between this draft and the draft from 2022 with Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal to put that bad karma out there. I mean, you don't want to do that, like we got to see what these guys do. This is a whole new draft, different players, different regime too, I mean, not totally, but obviously Harbaugh, is the headliner and, that's going to make a huge difference. So, and they even brought Evan Neal back. So, maybe he turns into a very good, interior offensive lineman if that's what they end up doing there. So,
Probably not.
but yeah, but wishful thinking. But yeah, no, I was definitely very pleased with the Giants draft. I mean, once the draft is over, you're kind of just like looking towards like the schedule coming out, and you just want to get, things rolling and get to the season and see how it actually all, plays out. But we still got time to go. Any final things you want to touch upon before we wrap up here?
Yes, I actually do. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I actually want to talk about something about a player that didn't get drafted that just came out.
Oh, right.
Before this podcast that we talked about a little bit before the podcast. We were talking about Diego Pavia signing a 3-year deal with the Ravens. Now, the original thing with Diego Pavia was that when he was undrafted and got this invite to, I believe, whatever it is, training camp, mini camp, he was going to get essentially a tryout to be on the team. The Ravens have Huntley and other people in that room, but we all thought that Diego Pavia, people were talking about UFL to get a big opportunity. People were talking about a lot of different things when it came to Diego Pavia. And again, people were asking me months out if I thought Diego Pavia was going to get drafted. I thought there was absolutely no shot at that. And I was very surprised that somebody gave him a 3-year deal right now without even that initial tryout, believing in him. I'm not taking anything away from the guy. He was great in college. When you look at Diego Pavia, he's going to enter the quarterback. He's going to enter as a quarterback as the smallest quarterback in the NFL with this 3-year deal. And then also at the same time, his antics off the field, everybody knows what happened after the Heisman ceremony and a bunch of other times as well. I feel like there's absolutely no place for a backup quarterback to have a very big personality to take eyes away from other people in that organization. Like if you're a backup quarterback, you got to be, pretty reserved for the most part. Not necessarily reserved, but again, not have
You have
headline.
to be ready to some degree.
So I was very shocked that the Ravens already signed him to a 3-year deal. Again, he's a guy that was great in college. I don't necessarily think it's going to translate by any means with, again, like I said, his size and then also off the field. But I was just so shocked with this player necessarily. Again, people expected me to draft it. I definitely did not. And then everybody was talking about UFL after, like I said. I was shocked that he already got the belief in him, especially for a backup quarterback, like I said, to have the personality that he has. I was shocked, especially I was even more shocked of the team as well. Like you look at the Ravens as one of the premier organizations in the NFL, one of the best friends organizations in the NFL. To give him 3 years already, I was pretty shocked at what I saw today.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something they really like, and also like we talked about it before we went live. He represents himself, so he did some kind of campaigning, I guess, or something. I don't know. Worked some kind of magic to get, to get this deal. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, you got Lamar Jackson there, but you show some flashes in preseason, maybe something does happen. I mean, the only other quarterback they have is Tyler Huntley. So, and Tyler Huntley's bounced around a little bit. So, there's no guarantee, his roster spot is safe. But, we'll just have to see. But that is something interesting that did come up and make waves. But I think that's so that's anything else before we
Yeah, I do want to talk about one more thing. So I feel like we can't get off of this pod without talking about the most excited player in this draft that we talked about, especially over the last 4 days. We've talked about him for a majority of our live podcast, everything. I feel like we have to end this pod at least bringing up Jeremiah Love, his destination, where he went, giving it to the viewers one more time that may have not seen our TikTok lives or whatever. I feel like you were very passionate about Jeremiah Love and the destination that he went to. I was in alignment with you as well, but I'll let you start off. What do you think about Jeremiah Love going? Every team hoped for this guy, but he went off the board almost as early as we could have thought at number 3 to the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, so I mean, there were the reports out there that the Cardinals were looking to trade out, and then you saw some reports that they would take Jeremiah Love. And I'm just sitting there going, again, well, I want to make this very clear. Love the prospect. But if you're the Arizona Cardinals, is taking a running back in the top 3 when you have a top 3 pick the right move when you're not really going to be competing for anything in the near future? You don't have your franchise quarterback. Now, they did take a quarterback. They took Carson Beck, and Carson Beck's played a lot of college football, played the national championship game, played at Georgia, and then, like I said, played the national championship game in Miami. So, Carson Beck might get a chance to show that he could be that guy. And, the Cardinal skill position players with Jeremiah Love, very good. Michael Wilson broke out, got Marvin Harrison Jr., got Trey McBride, who we both really love, as one of the top tight ends in the league. So there's some pieces on offense, but in the grand scheme of things, you look at or the landscape. You're playing in one of the toughest divisions. You got 3 teams that made the playoffs last year. 2 played in the NFC Championship game, and one of them won the Super Bowl, the Seahawks. So you got to deal with that. And you got some issues on defense. You got issues on the offensive line. Like there's just a ton of other things. And on top of that, your running back room is crowded. I mean, you got Trey Benson, you got James Conner. Those guys are coming off an injury. But I'm just saying, like, they're there. You brought in Tyler Algier. Like, there's a ton of guys there. So now you're adding to that room. So I don't know what the corresponding move is. You're going to probably move off of Connor or Trey Benson, I would imagine, right? I don't know if you're going to go into the season with 4 running backs.
I don't know.
I mean, you could, but it's just a combination of all those things where it's like, it just reminds me of the Giants taking Saquon. Now the Giants were trying to fool everybody into thinking that they were competing, that they were going to have a chance to do something in the twilight years of Eli Manning's career, and how they handled that. That's a whole nother story. So, and how did that pan out? Giants made the playoffs, a few years later, with Saquon, but then what happened? Saquon ended up leaving. They didn't want to give him the money, and then he went on and won the Super Bowl with the Eagles. So, but not saying that's going to happen with Jeremiah Love, but I'm just saying, like, the Saquon pick didn't pan out for the Giants. Now, could it pan out for the Cardinals? We'll have to see. But right now, you have a certain window with running backs because that position ages out very quickly because of that wear and tear. Maybe the Cardinals prove us wrong, but where your team is currently at right now, that was not the pick. That's really just my whole spiel with that.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it going into the draft. Like Jeremiah Smith to the Cardinals was a heavy rumor. We didn't know if it was smoke because they wanted to trade down. We consistently talked about it's very hard to trade up. I mean, we see a team did it last year with Travis Hunter. If anybody was going to do it, it's going to be for this kid, Jeremiah Love. But it's very hard for a team to trade up and give the adequate value when it's not for a quarterback. We discussed that. Jeremiah Love, again, out of teams in the top 5, top 10, Cardinals were probably the worst destination he could have went to. We talked about how running backs production primarily happens in the early years. They translate to the NFL quicker than anybody else, and their shelf life is a lot shorter than anybody else. That's why we don't like the Cardinals as a destination for Jeremiah Love. It wasn't our favorite destination. On the flip side, I can't sit here and bash the Cardinals too much. You arguably got the best player in the draft. You got the player everybody was talking about. You got the best player in the draft. And then also at the same time, you look at Jeremiah Love, Trey McBride, Wilson, Harrison Jr. You're setting your quarterback up, if it's going to be Carson Beck, if it's going to be a first-round quarterback next year, in a pretty decent situation. We've seen worse situations than having those skill players. I also think a lot of people are comparing Jeremiah Love to Ashton Jeanty. He's going into an organization with not the best offensive line, an organization that's not ready to use him. I think Jeremiah Love is going to be in a little bit better spot in his rookie year than Ashton Jeanty. I mean, hindsight's 20/20 because, again, we already know what happened with Ashton Jeanty. But I just think not even in the standpoint of, like, the offense is better. I think it's in the standpoint of, like, Jeremiah Love is way more – like, there's way more things he could do in a football field when you talk about catching the football, lining up as a receiver, breaking it to the outside. Like, he's so complete in his game. There's going to be so many different ways to use him. I think he's still going to have a pretty good year. And then I also want to discuss, like we talked about, the front end of a running back's years are their best years. I do think, like you alluded to, why I don't think it's the best destination. Year 1, year 2, you're probably looking at empty production. Jeremiah Love is going to be a great player in the NFL. It could happen right away, but it's not going to really translate to anything for the Cardinals. That's your biggest concern. The other thing I do have to say about Jeremiah Love, one, he's coming in with, like, generational, when you talk about carries coming in, like, they're extremely low. He got extremely low work that obviously came for Jadarian Price being in that backfield with him as well. But at the same time, like, let's not, in a sense, like, overreact to the extreme. If the Cardinals can figure this out and they either figure out at the end of this year that Carson Beck's their quarterback, or they go and have a high pick and draft a quarterback in the first round, it's not like Jeremiah Love is going to have 2 good years in the NFL. Like, he's going to have probably 5, 6 really good years. So if they could figure this out, their quarterback situation pretty early, maybe in Jeremiah Love's year 3, this team will be ready to go. Maybe that's their thought process. But again, like I said, like you said, would I rather him go to the New York Giants for him, a team that is more in place to make that jump in his first year? I would have liked that. Would I liked of him go to Tennessee? Not the greatest destination, but at least they have their quarterback and they could accelerate that player's progression. And maybe if Cam Moore turns out to who we think we can, they would be in a position maybe a little faster than the Cardinals. So there were definitely other situations that we preferred a little more, but I can't sit here and like completely drag the Cardinals for taking the best player in the draft. But again, obviously there were better situations. Again, I think ideally, like you said, the Cardinals would have rather trade down, but when you're not
Yeah,
trading up
it
for a
just didn't
quarterback, you don't do
materialize
that.
that way. Yeah. Yeah, and this was a draft where, with the third pick, you're not going to get, you know, a top dollar quarterback because it just wasn't that kind of class this year. And I guess it's just they didn't get what they wanted for the third round pick. And yeah, they went with, again, arguably one of the best players in the draft. So yeah, and the Genti comparison, absolutely. I mean, this is a better situation than Genti because you look at the Raiders. I mean, you got Brock Bowers, and it was a pretty weak receiving core. At least with the Cardinals, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Trey McBride, and Michael Wilson. Really, came into his own last year too. So yeah, I mean, on offense, the future's bright. It's just now it's about finding if it is Carson back or again, if they go and they have a high pick next year, you get a top quarterback there, and you try to build out the defense as well. So we'll
And I
have
do
to see.
I do like the I do like Algier being in that backfield because again, I feel like early in Bijan's career and it could be early in Jeremiah Love's career. Like you don't got to use Jeremiah Love every single down early. When again, like we said, it may
Yeah,
not be as meaningful to you in the early stages. Like you could use Algier in short yard situations. You could use Algier in red zone situations. Now, obviously, fantasy owners are going to get tight middle of the season about all that, but I think it would be beneficial for Jeremiah Love and his career and for the Cardinals pathway as well. And then, like you said, for Carson Beck, I mean, I think there's a chance Carson Beck could be an NFL starting quarterback. You look at all of the experience and pro style offenses at Georgia, Miami. You highlighted they were in a national championship. He was inconsistent. Like I thought his best year, ironically, was in 2023, and we're in 2026 or 2024, whatever it was, 3 years ago. But I think there's a chance of that as well. Like they took him high enough where you would think they're going to give him a shot at some point in this year. It's not like they took him in the sixth round. They
yeah,
took him with the first pick of the third round. So it's going to be interesting. But again, with all the Cardinal players, there may be a chance that maybe they don't pick in the top 5 or top 8. Maybe they're not that bad, and then that could also be. It's going to be interesting to see with their future.
yeah, yeah. No, Carson Beck is definitely going to have his opportunities. I mean, it'll be Jacoby Brissett to start the year, most likely, unless Carson Beck really balls out in camp and preseason.
Or something
But
happens.
one way or another, we will see him, and then we'll get an idea of could the Cardinals move forward with him or not. But it's gonna be interesting. But I think that pretty much wraps up that. Again, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Dami, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, Sloppy Saturdays everywhere. Sloppy Saturdays on YouTube, where again, you'll see this with Ken's video. Sloppy Saturdays, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, where we go live now, and then
Mhm.
everywhere. Sloppy Saturdays everywhere.
Yeah, so like I said, we said we are gonna try to do that more, especially when football season comes around. But yeah, that's just about that. So as always, everybody, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video and both of our channels. Make sure to follow us on social media platforms in the description and wherever you get your podcasts. You can look us up. Sloppy Saturdays, Infinite Sports, wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, everybody, host Kenneth Grunfelder signing off with Don Matassa. Have a good one. Talk to you guys next time.